Well, hello there, everybody.
Hello.
What's everybody doing tonight? Just loafing, I guess. Kind of like me. I know y'all not busy during the day. I know y'all just coasting. Have to
Oh,
have to back up to the boss man on payday. Can't look him in the eye for taking his money. I know. School business is easy. Uh, get everybody admitted here.
Hello, everybody.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello.
good evening.
Hello.
I see our presenters are here. That's always good. Y'all hate me to have to talk any longer than necessary. Uh, about 7 o'clock.
Questions.
Give them another minute or two here, and I'm going to share my screen, and we'll do our housekeeping. Okay.
Hey, Dr. Lamb, I was a little bit confused because I looked at the schedule and February 19th wasn't up here. Or it was some kind of strange the way it was put up there.
Okay. There she is. I was waiting on her. All right. Let me share my screen. Let me turn my camera off first and get it to share. Hey, Sean, how are you? All right. Looking at the schedule. There's Jessica. Here's the schedule. February 19th, Zoom class 3, Amy and Stephanie presenting tonight. This is the weekly schedule right here. That's Carl. And then we've got the overall schedule with everything. And there it is, 219.
I was looking at from the content area.
Oh,
'Cause I
up
saw
on the
that schedule.
blackboard. Yeah, I don't put anything under those.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, if you look at it from this, I mean, it's just going to be the video from tonight because the Zoom sessions are just student presentation. There is no content in those.
Right.
I don't try to cover content at night. We cover that on the weekends when we're together. We just do our chapter presentations, get in and get out. Y'all worked all day. Um, content takes a minute. And so our content is student driven. I like to see students present. I like to see them synthesize, read stuff, be able to explain it. You know, see, James has done got he's already got me wound up. Now I'm gonna have to tell a story. All right. So I arrive in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, having worked 15 years. Um, and you go to Charlotte and let me respond to this. Um, you think you are, but you're not really prepared for the amount of information. At least today it's electronic. Back in my day, it was paper. And when you showed up at the principal's meeting, they had stacks. I said stacks plural. And you needed a small boy to help you carry. You had so much. And so what we would do in the morning general session, you can see the top of my head, I had some hair then, but you saw because we sat there and we'd spread out in this auditorium and we'd make three piles. Um, Urgent, got to do something about this, do it this way. Then make another pile of things that we had to do, but we had the staff's discretion and how we were going to implement them. And the third stack was FYI. Well, the FYI stack was always, I don't need any more information. And so we would just throw that away in the dumpster at lunchtime when we went to lunch. And it got to be so much they had to bring a second dumpster and put one next to the door. We were throwing so much stuff away. But the idea was we had to sort through all this information and we had to know. And so when we did our faculty meeting, 30 minutes or less, like dominoes, or, we got out in 30 minutes. I was always clear, we're not going to stay more than 30 minutes. You've worked all day. You had the first section was there's no debate on this. Um, we got to do this, do it now, do it this way. So that's not for a vote or a discussion or any of that. This goes straight to the action agenda. There's no vote on this stuff. Now, here's the things that we got to do, but we have the discretion and we can talk about how to do them. I had to be able to sort that stuff and then go in and cogently present it. Now the FYI stuff, I just threw that away. I don't need that. But one of the things that I'm trying to get you to do through your weekend presentations and your class is synthesize fairly large amounts of information into short segments that can be digested by your faculty where you don't spend hours with them every week in faculty meeting. That's their number one complaint, folks. I'll tell you right now, the things that teachers hate the most is they've worked all day and then somebody like me gets up and drones on for 2 or 3 hours. At the end of the day, you can't get them to leave the profession fast enough for doing dumb things like that. We've got to start moderating ourselves. We're driving our own people out. Good people. We're not losing the bad ones, folks. We're losing the good ones.
Dr. Lamb, excuse me, pardon the interruption. Carl put in the chat that Alicia's trying to get in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So hopefully she'll get on here before long. I let me go back to video here. I got to stop my video again to do my share. Let me see. She called. Can't let me.
She called me. I told her that the link it wasn't live. She just needed to copy it and put it into the browser. So I think she was getting ready to do that, but she was just on her phone. So she said, put it in the chat that she was trying
Oh,
to.
she's on her phone. Well, she's going to have to download the app on her phone then.
Yeah.
This link.
I work. I
This
work.
one will work. Thank you, Carl. This one ought to work.
Okay, I'll tell her you sent that email.
Yeah, I just sent her a link that ought to work on her phone. All right. I'm back. But we have got to stop driving our people away. The business is intentional enough trying. Now we can claim that there's a crisis in teacher retention right now, but it's a crisis of our own manufacture. Now, as I've said before, it was okay as long as we were just eating our young, the kids, because there's plenty of them coming back the next year, just like the banks. They used to hire 5,000 kids every spring and, keep the 500 that they wanted and let the rest go. Well, we used to do the same thing. We used to eat our young. I mean, nobody made it to 5 years. 80% teachers didn't make it, past 5 years. But there was more coming all the time. Well, but that didn't save enough money. So I've shown you this before, and I'm going to show it to you again. What did the General Assembly do to the salary structure for a 30-year salary schedule for teachers? They froze it for 10 years, right in the heart of your prime earning years. From years 15 to 25, your salary is now frozen. They did that intentionally because we weren't losing enough people. It was costing to drive down personnel costs. So we're already handicapped by that. And, I was talking with a friend of mine driving in this evening. One of the things you've got to realize about people, and I can say this because I'm the oldest rat in the barn, the older you get, the less capacity you have to be aggravated. And so as teachers get to, 35, 40 years old, 15 years in, and you're keeping them after school every day for nonsensical things, just getting up and rambling on, they'll find something else to do because they're not going to get a raise for 10 years. I'm going to share that again. You need to see this. You need to understand this. We got to protect our wagon pullers, our great teachers. Certified teachers. What happens at year 15? You're making 53.8. There's Alicia. At year 15, you're making 53.880. What happens? You make 53.880 till your 25th year. And then you're that you get a raise then, and then you're frozen for the rest of the way out. We've got to get better at synthesizing data, information, emailing what we can, and curtailing the meetings. That's the number one complaint of teachers is I have a meeting all the time and they just drone on and on and on. So the idea here is on your Sunday presentations, you got to be able to put multiple things together. They're not always the same length or the same degree of importance. You've got to know how to regulate that. So let me show you what I mean. Let me share my screen. Going back, a couple of you have to make up your this Sunday. If you'll remind me, I may give you some time on Saturday, so be prepared on Saturday. So as we look at weekend one, you had the crisis assignment. You had your Sunday assignment presentations. There's one of those for each of the 3 Sundays. And so that one was right here. Presentation residency weekend one. This one's a little bit longer. And I went ahead and told you that. You don't have to do a PowerPoint. But then weekend two, here's this one. It's a little bit longer. Again, this should take 10 or 15 minutes for you to do this one. Then you got some smaller ones. Okay, you had your success assignment and your role assignment. Those are shorter. And then this coming week, when we meet next weekend, a week from this weekend, on the 28th and 1st, again, you'll have your Sunday 2 assignment from this sheet right here that says you are presenting to your fellow principals a new policy proposal that requires principals to spend at least 5 minutes a day in every classroom. All right, that's their bigger one. And then you got these 2 ethics assignments. But again, I've kind of given you a guide on that one, but you got to be able to adjudicate or investigate or assess how long should this take? Everything in an agenda can't be the same length or it'll take all night. Some things are just hit and run. Some things we got to stop and do a little bit more on. And you've got to develop that. One of the things that I see, I get tickled when you get to your IRB application, they tell you the length of space that we have after each question that we ask you is not related to how long the answer should be. You got to figure that out. See, students would send it in and they'd send coming back and they'd say, well, this is completely incomplete. And they'd say, well, I only had this much space. The space and how much time is immaterial. You got to answer the question. And you got to learn how that goes. And you can only do it from practicing it. It sounds pretty simple. Oh, Dale's making a big deal out of this. Yeah. You've been to those meetings. You've seen those school board presentations. You've seen that stuff. Or you've seen faculty meetings where you're like, they could have sent this in an email. This should take 15 minutes. Why are we here for 2 hours? We're already behind the 8 ball on when teachers get to 15 years, they're frozen. They get one more raise at 25 and that's it. And so they're not going to put up with much tomfoolery these days. That's why the crisis now is not that we're losing kids. We always lost the kids. We always ate our young. The crisis now is we're losing grown people who can actually teach. what I call the wagon pullers. We're the ones that are pulling your wagon. And so if you'll remember from 734 from personnel, the first 5 years, you hope that the beginners, the first year, you just hope they can find the building sober, clean clothes, not the ones they were wearing the day before. That was a problem in Charlotte back in the 90s. When downtown got cleaned up and the bar scene exploded downtown and the Panthers came to town, that, about half of you young people would come in the same clothes they had on the day before and a dozen bar stamps on their hand. And I remember, and it was the deal like from the movie School of Rock with Jack Black. He was substituting and he showed up and the kid said, "Oh, the teacher's drunk." And he said, "No, I'm hungover. That means I was drunk yesterday." That's what we got into in Charlotte all the time. They might not still been drunk, but they were hungover and showing up. That's what you get in the first year or two. And then slowly they pull out of it and they, at about year 5, they're wagon pullers, they're cost effective. But, and that group always just, we lost 20% of them every year anyway. That was okay. It's not okay when you're losing 15-year veterans. Your organization cannot survive that. So you've got to find ways that you can't always make them happy, but you can't make them mad all the time. Back to Hertzberg. There's things that make you stay and things that make you go. They're not related. Letting them wear jeans on Friday won't make up for a 2-hour faculty meeting on Wednesday. You got to learn that. You got to learn to communicate as effectively, as quickly, and understand everything doesn't need 15 to 30 minutes. The big stuff, if you can't do it in 10 minutes, then that's your problem. I don't care how big it is, you got to be able to do it in 10 minutes. And the smaller stuff, 5. That's why you get, I told you, you get 20 minutes for your presentation. That should cover 2 5s and a 10. You got to get in that habit of a 20-minute presentation for everything on your agenda. Everything. And it's got to be clear, it's got to be concise, big picture. Don't read your slides. Don't, I went to a meeting yesterday. And they had a PowerPoint up and they put that green highlighting over a black font. In what world can a man my age read that? 50% of the men my age have red-green color blindness. Everybody ought to know that. That's not news to anybody. What's the chance of me reading what he had on that slide? None. All the young people were sitting there nodding their head up and down. And I was like, you see, you didn't understand your audience. I might could have helped you. Not that I would have, but I might could have if I could have read your slide. But you told me it wasn't important for me to read your slide, so I went on about my business. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. Black and white is good. Don't impress me with your Canvas skills. I am not impressed. I'm impressed when you know what you're talking about. Not your video presentation. If you know your material, that's what impresses me. That's what leadership is. That's when people will follow you, not people who read PowerPoints. That won't get it done. All right. So everybody knows what to do next week. Next week. Now, did we already do our breakfast biscuit order when we got our class canceled? We hadn't done our breakfast biscuit order. All right. I will post that both in our shell. I'll send it as a message so you'll get it in your email. The biscuit order for next week. I'll try to I'll remember to do that tonight. If I don't, somebody email them and say they'll get the Bojangles biscuit order. So the first weekend, we normally would have biscuits. This is our second. And then the second weekend, we normally have lunch from Jason's. So my other group's having lunch from Jason's this weekend. And then the third weekend, we do potluck with a theme. So y'all will have breakfast on 2 and Jason's on 3. And I'll send you the link to the Jason's Deli menu and you pick what you want and I'll order it and they bring it. So this next weekend when we meet, again, a week from this weekend, we'll do Bojangles biscuits. I'll bring juice, coffee, water, and a few pastries, but you get to order your biscuit, whatever, and you get as many as you want. But now, understanding, we don't stop for lunch. We just keep going. That way we can get out an hour early. So we just eat our biscuits and go, and you grab another one or whatever we got at lunchtime, and we just power right on through, try to get done by 3. And get you back on the road, get you back where you're going, whatever you got to do. And then on Sunday, we'll try to be done. That's up to y'all. I split the time up where we try to be done by 1. If it takes us to 2, that's okay. At 2, I blow the whistle. We'll have to catch up the rest of the time because everybody's got to get back to work for Monday. I don't think there's any, knock wood, any bad weather in the forecast. Set a record for heat here in Charlotte today. It's going to again tomorrow. Hit 78 or 9 today, going to be 80 tomorrow. So I don't think we're going to have any trouble. They didn't say anything was coming for next weekend, so hopefully we'll get to go. James,
Do you have like a list of suggested hotels like you did Movers in Goldsboro?
the Drury, Drury, they're the one. Now they've gone up. It's $251 for 2 nights. And they do 100 this year. They're doing $100 refundable deposit. You get it back in 2 or 3 days. So it's going to be 351, but you get 100 of that back. But that's who we've got the deal with. Let me share my screen.
That's where I stay, and they also do breakfast and dinner.
Yes. It's even at 241, it's a good deal in Charlotte. All right, so it's the one at Airwood. Let's see, let me get the right one here. See right here, Arrowwood's is right here, and here's Gardner Webb. And so you get off on Arrowwood Road, and instead of going back east and making the first right here on Arrow Bridge, you get off, you go left, and it's right here. It's on the same exit, but it's the one at Arrowwood. This one right here
Oh, okay, Airwood. Yeah.
at Arrowwood. Make sure you get that one.
All right.
Charlotte Arrowwood. And as Stephanie said, um, um, they do breakfast and dinner. And it's a really good deal, and they do a good rate. It's a little more, but again, they do that deposit, but that's the place to stay right there. So that you're not somewhere in town. I
How
don't
close is it
think
to
there's
our
anything
campus?
coming up. I beg your pardon?
How close is it to campus?
Half a mile.
Oh, good deal.
It's just on the other side of the exit.
Hmm.
When you get off on Airwood off of 485, right here, when you get off right here, this is Airwood Road, the exit off. We're right here. We're on the road right here, the little frontage road, Air Bridge. We're on it. We're right here. That's about an eighth of a mile off the main road, and then eighth of a mile back that way, and another eighth, and then the Drury is over here. So you're talking about half a mile. You got four. You got four. Yeah, half a mile. You're half a mile. You could walk if you had to. But it's a half a mile. There's a Ruby Tuesday right there. But again, they have dinner. Um, and it's right there at campus. Um, campus is again right here on this exit. We're right here. You can't miss us.
Okay.
There's
Yep.
parking in the front and parking in the back.
Hmm.
So there's a Wendy's on this corner right here. Right here, that's your landmark right there. You turn right at the Wendy's. It's just right off. It's the first exit. I mean, it's the first road coming off of 77 onto Arrowwood. If you're coming from south to north, you don't even get off the ramp. Just stay on the ramp that gets off and it turns right in. If you're coming from north to south, when you get off and you come down, you come under the bridge and it's the first road. You got basically get on the entrance ramp coming off the exit and it's right. You'll see the Wendy's. It's right there on the corner. Can't miss it. Easy to get to. All right.
Good to know.
Easy. All right. All right. So for tonight's presentations, we have Amy goes first. She has her 2 chapters, and so without further ado, Amy,
Dr. Lamb,
you have the floor. Yes, ma'am.
do you mind if Amy and I switch?
That's fine.
Okay, great. Amy, are you still good with that?
All right, go right ahead.
All righty.
Let me turn my camera off so it'll share.
Let's see. Can y'all see?
We can.
Perfect. Is it okay if I leave it in this mode?
I like it in that mode.
Perfect.
I can tell when
Alrighty,
you get
so-
done.
Yes. Alrighty, so I did chapters 3 and 4 of the Fowler text. So that is Policy Studies for Educational Leaders. Chapter 3 is titled Values and Ideology. These are just some of the focus questions, but I'm not going to read them to you. So the focus questions mainly just talk about how values and ideology affect policy and policy proposals and what educational leaders can do to identify those and be more informed. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the role of values in policy. So a value is your ideas, your beliefs, and what you believe is important with education. So all these things define how people define policy problems, and then also how people in power define possible solutions to those policy problems. So you have to be very careful not to use your own ideas, beliefs, and values and only think about yourself and your self-interest when doing this. Oh, Lordy. Hold on, Dr. Lamb. I have to move your video because I can't see.
I was going to say that's kind of just disconcerting here.
There we go. Okay. So they go into talking about social theory, which is the belief that human behavior is shaped by both self-interest values and social values. So self-interest values are typically economic and power, dealing with money and power, as always. And then the general social values are order and individualism. So thinking about yourself and what's most important. Click back on this. Okay. Then it talks about the democratic values. So those are liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty and equality weren't surprising to me. The fraternity part was a little bit, I was just interested that was included here. So obviously liberty is freedom, independence, and choice. Equality, it was interesting how they spoke about that because at one point they gave a synonym of equity, which I do not believe is the same. All people are equally human and entitled to equal standing before the law. And then the interesting phrase from this was to not live too remote from norms of society. I thought that was an interesting way to phrase that. So you can live your own life, but not too far out there. Political equality and economic equality are both parts of that. And then fraternity, they talked about taking care of one another and how we should be looking at ways to be responsible for one another. And they mentioned the church and school being some of those places. When we talk about economic values, efficiency is like the number one thing that's looked at by people of power. What is this going to do for us? How much is it going to cost us? How do we know it's going to benefit us? The economic growth and then the quality of what you are trying to do with a policy. Ideology talks about the criticism of a status quo, what you want to see happen, what do you want to do to make everything better in the world, and the plan for achieving that. When they talked about a few of the different major US ideologies, we had conservatism, liberalism, and then it was really interesting to read about left-wing extremism and then also right-wing extremism, because they talked about how the left wing and right wing both do not want the government to involved in different policies they set. They like their individualism, but then they start to differ on what they believe that individualism is and how you can go about that. With chapter 4, the major education policy actors, I did not talk too much in detail about this since we have talked about this a little bit. They did focus on the state level and then who is most influential at the state level and what your education leaders can do to make sure they're following education policy and who some of those influencing factors are. So they talked about the different branches of government. We have the legislative branch, executive branch, and judicial branch. So the legislative branch has an education committee. Those are the people that develop your law. They review existing law, and then they hold hearings on issues that are found within those laws. And the finance committee is also a part of that, which I hadn't thought about them being at those meetings. I was just talking to our director of curriculum yesterday, who was at a state meeting, because everything we do involves money. So they have to be there for the state budget. The executive branch is our governors, our state boards of education, the chief state school officers, and then our state departments of education. And then the judges, which they talked about with the judges, how a lot of times those people, well, they're always lawyers that come into that position, and they like to kind of stay under the radar with things. And then our local government, we did talk about that a lot in our first weekend class, our boards of education, our superintendents. And then, further down, we have our city council. This part was the most interesting part to me, was our unofficial policy actors, because it talked about different interest groups. Some of them we don't have, like we don't have a teachers union, which used to be the most effective education interest group. And then I'll talk about the one that's most effective now. But these are the interest groups that affect policies and how they share concerns and what they want to do to influence how a policy works. Of course, all of these interest groups want them to go in their favor. So that just depends on where they stand with those values and ideologies. Those are the teachers union, State Department, the school board association, administrators association, and then parent teacher associations, which I don't have a ton of experience with because we don't really have one. And then our non-education interest groups this was interesting to me. You always hear about people lobbying and different businesses lobbying. And so the textbook talks about they do this because they want to keep taxes low. So they're there to ensure their business's safety. And I put an asterisk beside general business organizations because the textbook talked about how teacher unions used to be the most influential interest group, but businesses or business organizations have become the most important or the most influential, I guess you could say, interest groups about policy. And then the media, this was very interesting to me because we all see media in some form or fashion through the news, different news agencies, just browsing on the internet, different online services. Everyone knows you can hop on Facebook, see an article. And it talked about how the media will construe the information about a policy or issues with the policy, but they only choose what aligns with their ideologies and values or what they think is going to enrage the most people. Here's my citation from the book.
All right, go back to your chapter 4 slide.
Okay. Which one?
Not that one. That one.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
All right, folks. State level education interest groups at the state level. Now, at the local level, who holds all the power at the local level?
You city council.
County commissioners, city
County
council,
commissioner, yes. I'm sorry.
county commissioners. Why? Because they fund the budget or not fund it, right?
Mhm.
The school board can't fund their own budget. So when this group of you can stop your share. When the Gang of Five got mad about the high school challenge, $6 million going to three predominantly minority and all poor high schools in Charlotte. They were obviously Republicans. They were incensed that they were spending $6 million in those schools. That was 1/12 of 1% of the budget. That was walking around money. Did they run for the school board? No. What did they run for? The county commission. But that was their platform. So if you had seen their campaign rhetoric, their signs, and all that kind of stuff, what would you have assumed that they were running for? The school board. But they weren't. They knew school boards immaterial, unempowered. That's the term that we use in North Carolina and South Carolina. They are unempowered. They have no power because they don't have the power of the pen. They can't fund anything. So the Gang of Five ran for the county commission in Mecklenburg. Now, I have to be careful here in that I guess it gets kind of racist on my part, I guess, in that they got a person of color to be one of the five to run along with them so that they would be able to say, wink, wink, this is not racial. But everybody knew it was. But there was one fellow, he wanted him a seat too, so he went along with it. But everybody knew that it was racially motivated. But in order to have an excuse to claim that it wasn't, one of the four, one of the Gang of Five was not an angry, red-faced white man screaming and yelling. But the point of that story is this: don't assume. She was talking about left and right wing. Don't assume that everybody that looks a certain way is going to vote a certain way or going to be an advocate a certain way. That's pejorative and that's profiling and all that. It's not true. All of one color, race, gender doesn't all vote together. You can't just say because it's a bunch of white men, it's always racist, or you got to look at what they're doing or not doing. And that's the thing that you got to focus on is what is it they're wanting to do? Not just what do they look like. What is it they're wanting to do? And so at the local level, the only player are the county commissioners or your town council if you're a city. There are still 14 city districts in North Carolina. There's still 14 of those. There's one right up here in Mooresville. But the 100 county districts, that's all their county commissioners in North Carolina. And they are the only player locally, the only one. School board members used to have some power of persuasion. No longer. Now, at the state level, and this is what I wanted to focus on. Unions, we don't allow unions in North or South Carolina. The administrators associations have no power, zero. The State Board of Education has zero power and DPI itself has zero power. The only player in state politics, the governor has no power in North Carolina because there's a supermajority where? In the state legislature. So even if the governor says, I want X, Y, and Z, or I'll veto that if y'all try, what do they have with the supermajority? They can override their veto proof. So as long as there's a supermajority, the governor of the state is not even a player in public education. You notice you never hear a peep of him about public education because he knows he's not a player. The state superintendent, while being elected position, secretary to the school board and the state school board, and again, they have no power or authority because the General Assembly has shown we don't care what the court said. We're not giving you that money in the West Ed decision of the Leandro case. We don't have to. And the judges that were appointed, that are all part of the Federalist Society and in that ilk, the conservative, saying we're not going to make them. So in North Carolina, you got pretty much the General Assembly and the County Commission. General Assembly, state money, and through them comes the federal money. So your federal and state has to come through your state. Your local has to come through your county commissioners. And so at the end of the day, nobody elected, nobody appointed in actual public education has any control. None. Actual control. And the notion that we have the power of persuasion, those days are gone. It's the power of the pen. If you can't stroke a check, we don't want to hear from you. And so you notice that he seems like a nice young man, the governor in North Carolina. I have not heard one peep of him about public education since he was elected, not one. He has no power to affect anything in public education. Nothing. Not a thing. And so you got to know who the players are. You got to know the political landscape. Now it's a little bit different in South Carolina. In many ways, it's worse in South Carolina. Why is it worse in South Carolina? What party is the assembly in state assembly in South Carolina? They have a majority.
Republican.
All right, but the governor is what as well?
Republican.
Also, they don't have to worry about a veto down there. At least, the governor in North Carolina could pretend to be incensed and veto it, knowing it's going to get overridden. They don't even bother in South Carolina. They don't even pretend in South Carolina. You got two players in South Carolina as well. Everybody else, everybody else is not in show business. They're just out there. Have a and you've got to recognize that you can't be the guy. You can't be the guy in my last story tonight before we go to Amy. So I was principal on the east side of Charlotte, the junior high school, for a brief stay. And I was a senior high principal, but I went over and did some things, cleaned it up, and went back to senior high. But anyway, I was on the east side of town. If you know, the old Bojangles Coliseum at that time was the Charlotte Coliseum, right there on Independence. Well, when they did the expressway part coming out of downtown, they pretty much cut. There was no way that you could, and until you get completely out of Charlotte to the Matthews area, that there's any roads that come across. I mean, during that's an expressway down through there till you get all the way out to. They've even extended it, but it used to be you had to get all the way to East Mecklenburg High School, and it was all expressway, no exits or entrance. They had an overpass at Briar Creek, so if you were on the north side of Independence, you couldn't go across to go to the Coliseum anymore. That's why they built the next new one down on Tyvola Road. And then, of course, they tore it down before it was paid for and built the last one uptown. But the problem with that was that the train depot is over on Tryon on the north side of Independence. And so when the circus came to town, they had the elephants. And so they would have to get the elephants out and walk them down Commonwealth across the bridge over Independence at Briar Creek and come out on Monroe Road, come back down and come into the Coliseum. And so, here's the circus come to town, and they would have the clowns and everybody out and the elephants, and they'd be coming down. And so at Monroe Road and Chantilly Elementaries, they would let all the kids out and they'd stand along the sidewalk, and here'd come the circus right through town on that side of town. The elephants being the big thing to see. And of course, if you have elephants, the accompanying part to elephants is elephant poop. And so they always had a guy with a bucket and a shovel following behind the elephants. And somebody said to him one day, while I was standing nearby with our students there, and he said, we let the junior high kids out too. Said, if I was you, that's a terrible job. He didn't say it that way, but you can imagine what he said, scooping up poop. That's a terrible job. Said, I'd quit that if I was you. And the guy looked at him and said, and what? Give up show business? He thought he was the show. No, you're just the guy with the shovel and the bucket. You've got to understand in politics and in policy, if you don't have the power of the pen, you're just the guy with the shovel and the bucket. You're not in politics. You're not in power. you're not in show business. That's metaphor for you must have the power. You otherwise you're just the guy cleaning up. That's the mess that somebody else made. Sound familiar in public school? We're just the people cleaning up the mess that somebody else made because we don't have the power to change it. And no amount of policy wonking will fix that. You got to know that. Your policy shouldn't be about making people's lives better. Your policy should be about making things better for the people that work for you and the kids in your building. You're not going to change the overall structure because you have no power. Again, you're the guy with the shovel and the bucket. You better understand that. If you don't, you end up fighting battles you can't win, and most of those people get fired. They just don't make it. They do not make it in our business. I'm not telling you you shouldn't dream and you shouldn't want it to be different. What I'm telling you is how the power structure works, and you should be policying and working to make the lives of your employees and your kids better, not changing the business that we're in. We don't have any power to that. That's the thing you've got to understand. Now, initially, that's very frustrating, but it's also very liberating. You can focus on the job that you have, doing the best you can for the people that you come in contact with every day, and you can't worry about things you can't control. You can't sit and whine and worry about those kinds of things. It's actually very liberating because if you understand it, you can get focused on making things better every day at the level that you're on. And that's what you got to do. You got to focus on making things better at the level you're on every day. That's what policy is about. Making things better, not changing the world. Not at our level. That's not the purpose of our policy. It's not to change the world. It's just to make the lives better of the teachers and kids that we work with every day. All right. Amy, I'll stop my video and let you share.
All right, I may have to sign back out and turn back on because I have to turn on the thing with my computer. Oh,
Yeah.
Dr. Lamb, Amy just texted and said she's trying to get back in. She said it's waiting for someone to let her back in.
That'd be me. I've clicked the button.
Okay, I'll tell her.
There she is. Yeah, it's working now. Great. I love it when a plan comes together.
um, unmute myself. There we go. Okay. All right. So I have the school law and the public schools, a practical guide for educational leaders, and I'm doing the chapters 3 and 4 highlights. So into chapter 3 focuses on students' rights and our restrictions. So schools have the ability to regulate behavior, but students still retain constitutional rights.
All right, what are those? What there they are.
Yes.
Verse 14th and 14. What law case gave them those rights in 1969?
Not ready for a pop quiz.
Tinker versus Des Moines.
Yes.
It's always
Yeah.
it's very important to remember that, because that's what established what in schools? Due process.
Due process. Yeah.
And it's school law at the school level is all about due process. And it's procedural and substantive. Substantive is, what are they supposed to get? What's the substance of the due process? And procedural is, did you follow it? You got to always remember that at that granular level, it's about kids get due process since 1969, Tinker versus Des Moines. Got to remember that. That should ring a bell. Tinker versus Des Moines should ring a bell. They get due process. And it's, again, your district sets up what the process is, or based on state and federal laws, and said, all right, this is what you got to do. The trick is, when you get sued, is did you follow them? That would be procedural. When you get sued for negligence, and you probably will at some point, I mean, you proverbially the group, somebody will, you got to establish that you followed those steps. Very good.
Okay. So first, we look at freedom of expression, what schools can, how they can restrict the speech versus, and then how they can regulate the speech. So I have a thing where when I was in high school, I went to high school in West Virginia, and my senior year was the year of 9/11. And we had a case where a student who was brand new wanted to form an anarchy club, and she wore these clothes that was very anti-Afghanistan war. And this was the Sierra versus Kanawha County Board of Education. She ended up suing because she got suspended from school for her attire causing disruption in the schools. She thought she was her and her mother sued for unfair suspension, and it was something else, and then also for not being able to form a club due to her freedom of expression and the rights for assembly. The school found that she was legally allowed to. She did follow the school did follow due process in the suspension for her clothes, for they was a freedom of expression, and did violate the school dress code because it did cause a disruption in the schools. And so the judge said that the defendants were correct in the manner, but they weren't. She was not found. She was granted $1 in compensation for the fact that she was found in her favor of she should have been allowed to form a club.
That is correct. All right. Again, arbitrary and capricious are your standards here. Arbitrary, again, is you punish me and not Carl. When Jessica takes us out back and shoots us, she shoots me and not Carl. That would be arbitrary. Capricious is smoking's bad, but probably nowhere in the handbooks to say you can shoot me for that. That's a little too much. Capricious means too much. Arbitrary means you chose one and not the other. Now, back to Amy's point on the dress code and that. So, one of the case studies in 603 that some of you have been through with me is the kid wants to form a gay straight alliance. So the question is yeah, you have to let them form the club. That is, Amy is correct. But the question is not, I mean, that's pretty simple. You got to do that. That's not in debate. What's in debate is they have to have a faculty sponsor. What if no faculty sponsor no faculty member will step up and be their faculty sponsor? Should you appoint one? Let's stop your share for, well, better not stop your share. Let's talk about that one for a minute. Should you, as principal, appoint somebody to be the faculty sponsor of the club? That might be controversial. Should you do that, knowing that you got to allow them to form a club? But the rules are that they have to have a faculty sponsor. Should you appoint somebody? Carl said no.
I don't
No,
think I would appoint. I wouldn't appoint somebody first. That wouldn't be my first step. I would let a teacher organically say that they would sponsor
Yeah,
or have.
but exactly. And then, but I'm talking about is nobody stepped up. I mean, the motion's about to die for lack of a second here. Nobody's stepping up to say I'll be their sponsor. What do you
Then
do now, hero?
can't have the club.
Can't do that.
You have to appoint somebody, and it may not be against their morals, but they have to think about it as a supervising
All
role.
right. Who should you appoint?
I would, as a
Probably a
principal, I would
principal.
appoint someone that's the least amount of stink coming from them. They're not
But
gonna.
who's that going to be?
A principal.
That's exactly right.
Oh,
So I like working with smart people. You got to take the bullet on that one. Legally, you could appoint what the teacher contracts say, and any other duties assigned by the principal. So legally, you can assign it to a teacher, but that might be the dumbest thing you ever did. So what do you got to do? Well, I've made the APs draw. I took one. I took the first one that was controversial when I was a high school principal. I took the first one. And then after that, what did I make the APs do? I made them draw straws. I wasn't about to sign it to a teacher. Sometimes you got to be the one that takes the hit. But Amy is exactly right. You can regulate that, but you got to let them form the club. That is exactly right. And again, you have the power. But one of the things that you got to learn early on in your leadership career is just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Legally, you can assign any teacher in your building to be that club sponsor legally because the contract they have signed and any duties assigned by the principal. But I would not do that. You need to take the first bullet yourself, and if there's more bullets coming, then you got to divide it up among your APs. I hate that. That's heavy lies the crown. Heavy lies the head that wears the crown of leadership, folks. That's one of those whippings you got to take. But Carl's absolutely right. You would hope that somebody organically would step up, but if not, don't do that to them. You do it to yourself. And everybody will understand it when you do it yourself. They may not like it, but you do that to a teacher, things won't go well for you with the faculty. Because you have put them before you yourself. You have sacrificed them for yourself. That's never a good look. Never a good look. Very good. Continue on.
all right. Another student right is the student privacy through search and seizure. They have to have. They do not need a warrant or probable cause, but they only need a reasonable suspicion.
That is correct. Now the police have to have probable cause.
Mhm.
All right, but now here in practice, here's the trick. If you can't remember this, you might want to write this down. While you as a school administrator have the right, all you got to do is have reasonable suspicion. That means you don't have to have probable cause, which is a much more difficult standard to search somebody. I would not search unless the police were present. And I'm not saying that I would have them do it. You do it, but they're present. And here's the reason why. What if you find something illegal? You can immediately do what? Turn it over to the police. You can't take a knife off a kid and just put it in your pocket or drugs or whatever. Now you're in possession of that. And that becomes, that's a bigger deal than you'd think it would be. That's a bigger deal than you would think it would be. So if you're going to search some kid and you think, well, and the police say, well, we don't have probable cause, and you say, I feel really strongly that I need to do this, that's when you ask them, will you go with me and observe me doing this in case I find something that I shouldn't, that I can turn it over to you. And that's the way that you go about doing that. Don't search any kid without the police present. And sometimes you might be searching for something. You say, "Well, I was just looking for," we had an ink pen that was missing. Yeah, but what if you find a knife? What if you find a bag of drugs? You don't ever know what you're going to get. So make sure that you understand that maybe the police can't do the search. I can, but I need the police to be there anyway and make it very clear I'm going to do the search. That protects you and them. It protects them from a lawsuit on not having probable cause. It protects you from taking possession of an illegal item that you now possess. That's the trick on that one. Please continue.
All right. Drug testing is allowed for athletes and extracurricular participants. It's not allowed for random testing of entire student body.
Why is that the case?
Because that could be
What's the
targeting.
difference in the two?
Athletes, that could be cheating. That could be trying to performance enhancers.
But I mean, why is it legal to do these particular groups? Anybody doing, athletics or any other extracurricular? That's actually just one, but it's not the random population. All right. So here's the thing. Extracurriculars are not a right, they're a privilege. And you have to, and they have to voluntarily, in order to participate, you have to voluntarily. Coming to school is a right. Extracurriculars is a privilege. And so for that privilege, you're giving up your right and to be drug tested. You can't do that to the student body. Now you got to be careful with that one. You got to be careful with that one in that what I've seen is, somebody in this room's got drugs, so we're gonna search the whole room. No, don't do that. You say, well, that's a group just like athletes, and yeah, but again, they have the right to be in that room. That's a constitutional right to be in that room. There's no constitutional right to be in extracurriculars. You understand the difference there? So even though you've got 30 kids in the classroom and you say, I'm sure it's somebody in that room, you still can't go in and randomly search all 30 of the kids in that room. You have to understand why you can do athletes and extracurriculars and you can't do the student body in general. And that would lead you to understand, oh, I can't just go search that room of kids. I'm not searching the whole student body, but they represent the student. They are the student body when they're in that room. When you're doing extracurriculars, you are not the student body. That is extracurricular. That is not part of what you're guaranteed. Now we're into privileges, not rights. They have the right to be in that math room, that math classroom that you want to search. So that's why you got to understand why you can search one and not the other, so that you can apply it to broader circumstances when those arise. That's the trick about searches and drug testing, which is a search, by the way.
So students can, as you've spoken before and previously, students cannot be punished arbitrarily. They have to have policies that follow suit, that you follow a certain order and certain criteria. It's not random. And then other student rights that are covered is corporal punishment, off-campus behavior, harassment, bullying, and pregnant and married students' access to school.
All right. Talk about pregnant and married.
I know it's been in some schools where the principals have tried to encourage pregnant and married students to not attend school because it was a bad image for other students to see or for the schools
That was the
to where,
episode of Reba, wasn't it? When Reba had that TV show, wasn't that one of
yeah.
the episodes on it? It was. I don't watch much TV, but I was tipped off to watch that one. What about in Charlotte back in the day? We had an alternate. Now, listen to what I'm
Mm,
saying now. I did not say alternative school. I said alternate school. Alternative is for disciplinary reasons, and you go and stay a short period of time, modify your behavior, and come back. Alternate school is that's now your school. All right. What if your district set up an alternate school? Can you make married and pregnant kids go to the alternate school?
you can't legally make them
That's correct. Why did we think we closed Midwood?
because that's not separate but equal does not exist.
There you go. That's exactly right. Separate is not equal. Now, they can volunteer to go to the alternate school because usually they run a modified schedule and sometimes they have nursing and, you know, prenatal care and those kinds of things, but you
Right.
can't make them go. At one time in Charlotte, we made the girls go to Midwood. That is correct, but that's illegal, and we had to disband that. So you got to understand, while you might think it's a bad look for your school, and even if your district were to fund an alternate school, you can't make them go. You can offer it, but you cannot make them go. Again, you got to understand the core principle behind that. And again, separate's not equal. That's exactly right, Amy. I like working with smart people.
All right. Chapter 4 goes into student records, privacy, and information rights. School controls the records, but parent and students control the access. We have FERPA, which is the law governing student education records. That's where parents and students have the right to inspect the records, request corrections, and control disclosure. Again, just like all FERPA records, we cannot release information without consent. Directory info. Pardon?
Go right ahead. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
want to follow up on FERPA.
Okay. Directory information. The school is released limited information unless parents opt opt out. So that means name, address, grade, participation activities, and they must be notified if that information is released.
All right.
Confidential versus public records is grades, discipline, health records is confidential. Not protected is your personal teacher notes or law enforcement unit records. Then we have subpoenas and law enforcement requests. Schools may release records with court order, emergencies, but must document disclosure. So there must be a record holding of all the times your information was released. Electronic data and privacy applies to emails, digital records, learning management systems. Schools must ensure that the information is secured storage, limited access, and then there's staff confidentiality training.
All right.
And we have special education records. IDEA provides additional protections, strict confidentiality, parent participation rights, and record access during disputes. And then the overall big picture I had for chapter 3 was make discipline decisions legally defensible. And then chapter 4, protect confidentiality and manage records correctly. So I'm going back to FERPA.
All right. Schools cannot release records without consent. it says with exceptions, but part that you need to remember is schools cannot release records without consent. All right. Schools cannot release records without consent. Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? You can stop your share now. It's not simple. I was in Metro, the new one. I was there for an audit. Metro is a public separate. Every kid in there is severely and profoundly either mentally and physically handicapped. Every kid in there is covered by FERPA. Every kid in the building has an IEP. I was in the lobby. The door was open to the teacher's lounge. There was a group of teacher assistants in there talking about kids. Is that a FERPA violation? Release of records doesn't have to be you sent somebody their cumulative folder or their EC file. Release of records, if you're talking about a kid who's EC, that's a release of records. Several years later, we had a young man who came through Gardner Webb and got his doctorate with us, and I shortly thereafter employed him to work with me in 603 law because he's an EC expert. He was the EC director for the district, and he'd been principal. He worked with me until he left public school and went to work for Curriculum Associates. He's their MTSS to EC expert all over the country, making a big salary. But part of it is he was named in a lawsuit when the last year that he was in the district when he was principal. I mean, it was like 5 years later when the lawsuit came because two teachers, not him, but he was principal. Two teachers were standing in the hallway at class change, and what were they doing? They were discussing a child who happened to be EC. Another teacher overheard them, and was friends with that parent, and told that parent that these two teachers were talking about your child in an open forum. Is that release of private records? Absolutely. That happened in Lincoln County. That's not hearsay, folks. That happened fairly recently. Big settlement. Big. So forever in our business, folks have thought release of records means I sent something electronically, a file, a folder. They used to pack up. I mean, y'all aren't. Hopefully, you aren't old enough to remember when when the last grade, the culminating grade in the school over the summer, they'd box up all the big cumulative folders. Y'all remember those big old cumulative folders? We'd box those up and send them to the next grade level. And we'd make sure that they stayed secure and got them to where they needed to go, and the EC files as well. That it's not just that is my point. If you are talking about an EC child in anywhere outside of the IEP meeting, that is not protected speech. That is a release of records. That happens quite frequently. And even if you're just talking among yourselves, or even if you're just talking in the lounge, if somebody can overhear you, that's a release of records. That's one of the things you really have to work with your teachers about. At the school level and district, you have to work with your principals and teachers about understanding. Now, we've got an added level of problems in North Carolina with this Parent Privacy Act, Parent Bill of Rights. You can't be talking about any kid now, not just EC kids. You can't be talking about any kid. That would be that would be a release of records to talk about any kid. And that's one of the things that you're really going to have to be on top of your game on, is that release of records. When we think of it as a physical thing, no, it doesn't have to be the physical record. It can just be verbally talking about a kid. So that's the one that trips us up in the modern era more than any other. Is that particular piece of it. School discipline is one of those things that, again, if you don't know, you better ask somebody. You can get that one wrong real quickly. But I think, the state releases, and we go over the state disciplinary data manual. I went over that one for you, and it's DPI's. They pull all the state law, the federal law, and the state board policy. They put it all in one handy dandy place. DPI does that and says do this and don't do that as a result of this, and they tell you why you're doing that. But they don't set the punishment. Your local school board does that through the code of conduct. The majority of cases come from claims of arbitrary and capricious. You punished my kid, but you didn't punish the other kid, or you punished my kid too severely for what they did. Now you say, well, I just followed the handbook. It's in the interpretation of what they did. And so what I have seen in recent years is a de-escalation kind of we kind of write it in one level. We enter it one level below what it actually was, so that we don't get caught on that being capricious. So instead of fighting, it was an aggressive behavior. That's what I'm talking about. Schools have started doing that to their detriment because they're afraid, if I charge him with this is the range. They're going to get me saying that I was capricious. I charged him with too much. I might have punished him by the handbook, but the charge was too much. That's where we're getting the capricious claims, or that we arbitrarily decided it was a fight rather than aggressive behavior. So that's why it's so important to document, to have all of these things, because the next day, it was a bloody knockdown, drag out fight, but the next day, when everybody's calmed down and you got the blood up out of the hall, according to the parent, it was just horseplay now, and you're punishing them for way too much. You're being capricious. And so that's why it's important to document all these things. That's kind of the benediction tonight on school discipline, is make sure due process says you need to have witness statements. You better be getting and getting as many and as strongly as you can to support the decision that you made in terms of what you classify it as. And then you go to the handbook and look and see what the punishment is. But right there, that's the part that folks don't understand. The handbook's pretty clear. As long as you stay within the range, you're golden. The trick is, what did you classify it as? There's a lot of guidance in that DPI manual as to how to classify these things. That's where you go back to that and you follow that guidance and you look at those witness statements. That's the trick. What do you say this is? Okay, is it aggressive behavior? Is it disruptive behavior? Is it fighting? Is it an assault? Which of those is it? After that, the handbook takes over. But the discretionary piece is in what you classified it as. That handbook has page after page of guidance of those kinds of things to help you make that determination. Now, the trick is you need to treat each of those similarly in terms of every time X, Y, and Z happened, it's aggressive behavior. X, Y, Z, A, B, and C happened, it's a fight. X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, F, G, it's an assault. And you got to be tracking yourself so that you're being consistent and not arbitrary, not in the punishment so much, but in the classification of what the offense was. That's the trick. The classification of what the offense was. That's where you can't be arbitrary. That's where you've got to be consistent right there. It's easy. Then the code of conduct takes over and you stay within the guidelines. They can't get you on that end. But what they're going to argue is you arbitrarily decided that this was a fight rather than aggressive behavior. And that put the punishment in a whole nother category. And it does, as you know. Last pop quiz for the evening. 2 kids are fighting. A third kid jumps in. Is it still a fight? What's the state handbook say? Two kids are fighting in the cafeteria. Third kid jumps in to help one of them. Is it still a fight? Nope. Now an assault. Two or more on one, according to the law, penal code, is now no longer a fight. It's an assault. What about the kid that got that was, he was fighting the other kid and somebody jumped in to help him. He didn't know he was going to jump in. Is he still guilty of an assault? That would be yes. You got to know stuff like that. You got to know stuff like that. Where do you learn that? In that manual. And that's where you stay out of that arbitrary. You treat everybody, every third person jumps in, always an assault. That's what the manual says. And you make sure that in the classification of the incident that you get it correct. And you'll save yourself a lot of pain and heartache down the road when the lawsuits and the charges start flying around. All right. It's 8:20. We've done well. Anytime we get out in less than an hour and a half, it's a win. Anybody have anything for the good of the group? I will send you the breakfast order from Bojangles. Again, I'll have coffee, water, and juice. And we'll have Bojangles biscuits. I'll get a few random pastries. We'll work right through lunch. If you want to plan your day, we'll try to be out by 3 o'clock. On Sunday, presentations will definitely be out by 2. We try to get out by 1. All right. Anybody have anything else for the evening? Everybody knows when we get together again, Saturday week in Charlotte. All right. Work on your policy analysis paper. Kind of keep up with that. Put first things first. Know what's important. Those of you who have other things that are more pressing, like your dissertation class or your other class, make sure you get that stuff first. We don't have deadlines in this class. You'll get it by the end of the semester, I'm quite sure. All righty. Good to see everybody tonight. Thanks for playing along. I'll see you Saturday week.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Have a great week.
You too.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Have a great one.